Greetings and welcome to my channel. This is Sorcerer Tal. You can also find me on Facebook in the Sorcerer's Guild. Today on Magical Theory and Sorcerer Tal's Tales, we are not only going to be discussing where I have been for the last month, but we will also be discussing how travel creates a liminal space within the wanderer as they move from one destination to the next, allowing them access to that in-between or crossroads, which not only facilitates greater communication with the Awa and other spirits, but also opens one up to many very interesting possibilities. And also how going on a walkabout or journey is also almost a necessary pilgrimage to the sorcerer at some point, so that they can understand the greater context of the outer world by leaving the smaller world that they have created and going out of their reality tunnel or comfort zone and getting greater context into what the shared reality really is. Okay, so my journey, of course, actually began here in Utah, but I was headed up to Canada to see my romantic partner, Felix, who lives in the Salish Sea up in Canada. And I would just like to say it was wonderful, is wonderful, to be with someone who understands relationship anarchy in the same way that I do. Anyways, as I said, my journey began here in Utah with my, and of course, like any journey I take, it began with some spellcraft that I performed here. In this particular case, it took on the form of, well, I envisioned, this is something that I do with almost every travel, with any time I travel. I envisioned my journey from starting point to end point, because of course I've mapped it out many times already, so I know exactly which roads I'm taking all the way from here to the Salish Sea up in Canada, what ferries I need to take, the whole thing, and I will imagine all of that, and then as I do it, and then as I imagine it, I let that flow come in, and I picture myself getting all the way there, and once I feel it built up, I will then imagine a shell around me and my vehicle traveling that journey and making it safely from one end to the next. And as I have that going, I will then snap my fingers and allow that flow to go out. Yeah. And that is how I begin my journey. Often while I am picturing that flow, I will consider a few variables that may take place, but anytime that I stop, I will then, once I begin again, perform that full process again from where I am up to my end point. And that keeps me, I feel, very safe on the journey and just keeps a good flow to what I'm doing and also reminds me where I'm going. So it's quite helpful. Anyways, on the way there, as you saw in the last video that I shared quite a while ago, I encountered some hummingbird moths at one of my first stops. And it was kind of beautiful how they just showed up as I was there, and they allowed me to get very close, and I was able to film them from very close. It was quite nice. Anyways, not much else of note happened on the rest of my journey to their house, and I arrived there at Felix's home and greeted them with, of course, great excitement, and we had a wonderful time. But on that first day, not long after I got there, I got a call from back home saying that someone was missing. And they asked if there was anything I could do about it from there. So, of course, I saw what I could do. And Felix led me to a nice place in the woods where I could do that in peace. And I used my crystal ball and my bone scalpel because I felt that this was, in a way, possibly a healing thing. And I looked into the crystal ball, holding this bone scalpel in the other hand, and visualized this person and tried to see if I could find where they were. And I did, in fact, have a impression that they were not in danger and weren't exactly missing. Rather, well, frankly, they had left so that they could get some attention. And so then I focused on that and the flow of energy of where where my intuition was telling me they were, and the flow of what they were doing, and that seeking of attention. And as I was doing that, I took a stick off of the ground and I pulled that flow into the stick. And then just as I did the stick breaking, to break that flow of energy of them seeking that attention, I also envisioned a new line coming across that one of this person then contacting their family and agreeing to come back home. And by the time I got back to back to Felix's house, I got a call from my family, and that is what had happened. They had contacted them and were on their way home. And then I had many lovely days there with Felix, and then they took me to an old growth forest that's up there in Canada. And while we were traveling through this old growth forest, there was this spot, and it felt foreboding, forbidden even, like something was telling us that this was their place and that we should not go further. In fact, it was Felix that mentioned this first. And then at that point, I decided that, well, if I wanted to go further, I should at least introduce myself. So I did my call with my hands. I did that 3 times. And when I did, we suddenly heard this crackling of the trees, like clack, 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 clack. And then there was some wind coming up through the trees, as if there was a tunnel of wind coming from one particular tree that we could see where it started, where the clacking had started, like cracking, and sounded like cracking and crashing of branches, and it came right towards us on the trail. And it came till it was right in front of us. And as it did, there was a swirl of wind in those particular branches. And it looked down at us. I very much felt looked at. And I looked up to it and I said, "Hi, I'm here." And as soon as I did, I felt greeted back. And then that wind went back in the exact same way it came, going right back into the very same tree. And then I felt that I was allowed to continue, and I walked down that trail towards the tree that I had seen this wind originate from. And I walked down to there, and we was looking at the tree, and I felt very odd about approaching the tree itself, but I had this barter, and so I decided the next thing that I should do would be to ask permission once again. And so I said, "May I approach you?" Clack 2 times for yes. And I almost immediately, well, very immediately, heard 2 clacks, but it didn't sound like that. It sounded like trees knocking together. And so, being careful not to disturb all the vegetation in the area, and how we did that was actually walked across some fallen logs rather than directly on the ground over to that tree. I greeted the tree and attempted to whistle to it for a while. And I very much felt it wanted music. And then I thought about the barter that I had, and I wanted to give it a piece of turquoise because I felt that was an appropriate item for me coming from the desert all the way up there into this old growth forest, that a piece of turquoise would be an appropriate choice. But somehow it knew what things were in my barter bag, and it actually wanted a different bead that was a labradorite bead. It's actually a very nice piece, and it really wanted that. So I agreed to give it that piece, and I put it in a small hollow at the bottom of the tree where I had seen the wind come from. And then after I had done that, like I said, I tried to whistle once again, and I wasn't being able to whistle very well, and I told it that I would come back very soon and play my flute for it, since I didn't have my flute with me. We were leaving the area. I felt it call to me again, almost as if it was like, well, I need to be able to get a hold of you still. It felt like it wanted me to make a link. And then I started seeing another bead in my bag, in my mind, which I am now wearing. Let's see if we can get that on the camera good. And it's actually a copper emblem of a tree. wearing it on one of my charm necklaces here. At any rate, I had a vision of that, and at first I thought they were asking for it, and I was like, well, I'd already given you the labradorite bead. Anyways, I get it out, and then it urges me to come up to the side of this trail where there's just some dirt there. And it has me bury the bead in the dirt for just a moment so that it can transfer some of its energy onto this medallion here. And so I allowed it to transfer in. This is actually kind of a common technique. This is something I'm familiar with. I discuss it in a few videos when talking about making a head for grandmother. How the energy, how the spirit transferred from the dirt from the crossroads of the cemetery. How I brought that home to the head that I had made to establish communication with her. Anyways, that is in a different video. I'll leave a link to that here. And so then I take it out of the dirt, and then I had to fiddle with it for quite a while, but I managed to fit it onto one of my necklaces. And then we went home. And that night, as I'm sleeping, I have this dream that, well, this is why I say it's a sky person, because in the mythology that I am used to, that's what I would call this person. I saw this, I had a dream about that tree, and there was a figure coming out of it wearing all this white buckskin and a very specific bead pattern on the chest of the white buckskin they were wearing. And they had the white moccasins, and they had all the white that, to me, denotes a sky person. And they came down out of the tree, and they told me that they were very interested in talking to me, but that they didn't trust my two legs, which means they didn't trust my human form. Though I could come with them as a spirit and have this communication with them, but I would not be able to remember any of it in the morning besides the fact that we had met. And so I apparently agreed to that because I don't remember anything past that, but I don't remember anything past that, so I would assume I agreed. Anyways, when I woke up in the morning, deciding to be romantic, I decided to make Felix breakfast because I'd already learned how they liked their coffee and what they liked for breakfast and those sort of things. So I went downstairs to make them breakfast in the morning. And just after I had gotten everything set up the way I needed it to be, I went out to smoke. And there was that same swirling in the trees. Apparently, the sky person did not want to wait around. They did not want to wait around for me to come back and play. And they were up in the tree there very much urging me to come play. So, since I had breakfast at a point where I could do that, I went in and I put everything on low so it would take just a little more time than I had expected. And I snuck upstairs and I carefully got my flute, trying not to wake up Felix. They actually did stir just a little. But I got my flute and I came back downstairs and I played for the sky person for quite a while. At some point, I closed my eyes and began playing. And as I was playing, I actually heard footsteps walking across the lawn, well, across their backyard. And I began playing to the sound, and I could hear someone dancing to the flute as I was playing it. And then just as I was getting to the end, I got feeling real brave, so I decided to open my eyes again. And when I did, it was their roommate who had heard my playing and come out to dance for it. I looked at them and said, "Oh, I have bacon cooking!" And I ran inside because I was afraid I had burnt the bacon because I just remembered then that I was cooking. And I ran back inside. I did, however, notice while my eyes were open and I was looking up that this sky person had left. They probably left not long after someone else walked out. But either way, my obligation had been fulfilled to play for them. So I went ahead and went back to my breakfast plans. A few days later, we went to a cemetery, And that was actually quite interesting. And there's some fun parts there because in that same video I mentioned earlier, the one about entering a cemetery where I discuss the stuff with the dirt, I also discuss making a knocker. And since I have to edit this some now anyways, I'm going to grab that real quick. What a knocker is something that is used in necromancy and entering a cemetery, and it is something that should be made out of 2 organic materials. You can use one that is just wood for some certain things, but it should be wood covered in bone. And this one itself is actually quite improvised, honestly. It's one I made when I needed something and, well, to speak with grandmother for the first time, and I have just never made myself a better one. I have the stuff to do it, I just haven't. Anyways, it needs to be wood and bone, and since we were going to a cemetery, and under the circumstances, I felt that we should, even though we were going there for a picnic, we should do it properly. But I hadn't brought my knocker with me, and so we actually took a chopstick, we had a chicken, took one of the drumsticks off of the chicken, broke it in half, and stuck it inside the drumstick, and used that as our knocker. And it worked just fine. The spirits were not, the gatekeeper was not upset or offended by that in any way. I knocked 3 times with the knocker on the edge of the cemetery, said I am here to picnic with the dead because that's what I was there to do. Paid my 3 silver coins, which in this case were American quarters up there in Canada, and entered the cemetery. We had a lovely picnic. We left a little bit of an offering there for the dead with the chicken and stuff like that, which was immediately also shared by the wasps that were living in the area. But also, one of the things I feel worth mentioning while I was in the cemetery is that one of the graves was the grave of a man named Alan Nutter. And it said he was a miracle man. Now, I don't know anything else about this Alan Nutter besides that he has a gravestone there, and that he was a miracle man. But it had many of the little dolls that they carve in the area up there. And I feel he is someone that is probably significant enough that I should mention that I saw his grave. Whether the man's not famous, I assume, in any way I know, but he's still a significant enough person, I think, that I should mention that I saw Alan Nutter's grave. Anyways, and then after the cemetery, I enjoyed quite a bit more time up there, honestly. Had a great time. I was going to film at the cemetery, but I just didn't. I got no excuse other than that. I just didn't. I haven't filmed again until now. So, the last thing we're going to talk about while I was still up in Canada is another spell that I did another spell that Felix and I did while I was up there. And that is a spell intended to mitigate the pain of loneliness that one feels when they are separating from a lover. And so, in order to do that, we actually use these chalices here. I managed to get 2 of these while I was up there. I found them at a thrift store where they were. And they're just small little silver chalices, which, cups represent emotion and the tarot. There's lots of good reasons for it to be a chalice. But then we actually put a small candle in the bottom of each one, and then they lit theirs, or technically they lit mine, and then I took that flame and I transferred it from that chalice over into theirs, and then we let those burn. The next night, we took them same chalices, and I poured oil into theirs, and they took that oil and poured it into mine. And there were some other parts of the working as well. This is something that can be worked with, but what we were doing was creating a strong link between not only our emotions and feelings towards each other, but also between the 2 cups, so that when I left with my cup, we would have that free-flowing connection between us. Then time to leave, I went down. I did a similar spell to my next destination, which was actually down in Washington, where I was going to be meeting one of the other admins from the Sorcerers Guild, Paul Clark. And I did the spell and went on my way. No incidents in between. And I met up with Paul Clark. We immediately hit it off. First time we'd met in person. We had a great time. We've known each other for years, but it's the first time we've ever actually met in person. And while I was with him, we had a few discussions about some of the things he saw in India and some of the spirits that he has worked with there and the different areas he has been. But while he was there, he found that there are certain things within the architecture of these temples that he learned about, where is able to create almost an eddy current within the energy flows that allow a vessel, that it create a better vessel or space for spirits to exist in. And we had a little bit of a discussion about how when we get to a guild hall, how we could possibly use that idea in the creation of our own buildings. Anyways, we had a great time. Thank you for everything once again, Paul. It was great. And then the next day, so I spent a day. I got into where he was late at night. Stayed at a hotel room, which he paid for. He picked me up the next day. We had a great time. Did all that stuff. Then I spent the night at the hotel room. The next day, I got up and continued my journey. Now, this next part of my journey, this is where there was that real liminal space. There's that liminal space in between, but in this part of the journey, I couldn't really do that. This is where I'm going. Now, I did have a destination. I was headed to my brother's house in Sacramento, but I had plenty of time and didn't need to be there for a couple days. So in the meantime, my only destination was going down 101. I did pick out a particular spot I wanted to see some redwoods, so I put redwoods into my phone and at random picked a place called Redwood Trail, which happened to be along 101. In fact, it was pretty much right along 101. It was perfect. Anyways, so I wandered off to this destination, and I talked a little bit before about how there's that free flow state that allows better communication with the crossroads while one is wandering. And as I was hoping for during this process, I was hoping that I would come to a little better understanding of grandmother's role within the AWA and that connection to the crossroads of the AWA as I was going. And as I'm driving, there had been some communication already, some deeper understanding, but now at this point, I'm really there in that liminal space, and I have the right mindset because I have nowhere in particular I'm going. I'm fully in there, in that wander. And at some points, it was almost as if I could hear her, as if she was in the car with me, speaking with me. Not like I could hear her voice outside the car, but it was just such an open communication. She was there, and we were communicating, and I have come to a much better understanding of what is going on there and her role within it and how it connects to other things that we have talked about before, as well as including the Horde, as well as the chorus sigil that we've been working with, and even the bridge that we made on that we finished on May 5th of last year. This Redwood Trails, and I had this feeling in my calls again. Almost that was the first thing I did when I got there. So I'm walking down the trails. Do that 3 times. I don't want to do it too many times here, or as loud as I did it there. I did it there much louder. Anyways, and then after that, I actually felt the trees waking up around me, but there was no crackling of branches, nothing of that nature, simply an awakening of the forest. And this time I had my flute with me. So I began playing my flute. And I played my flute for the trees because I felt that these big, giant redwood trees, which were so beautiful, deserved something like that. They deserved music. They deserved some sort of acknowledgement. A gift much greater than just tobacco. They needed something artistic from art, Sorcerer Tell. And so I played to them as I was walking down the trail. And then I continued on my journey. Okay. So, the next thing that happened then was I got down to my brother's house, and they wanted to take me to the Winchester Mansion. Now, as you may know, the Winchester Mansion has quite the reputation for being haunted. And there are two different tours there. The first one my brother went on before takes you through some of the areas that I didn't get to go to because we went on one that was specifically a spirit tour. And I was quite excited about all this, and it was quite interesting seeing all the different things that this lady had built and hearing her story. I actually brought my crystal ball and my bone scalpel with me and was using them, holding them, and actually using them during different parts of the tour, hoping to experience some of the famously haunted stuff there at the Winchester Mansion. What I will say is that it was surprisingly, in fact oddly, unhaunted. I did not see any kind of spirits in there whatsoever on that entire tour. That being said, there's an area of the house where she used to seclude herself. This particular tour did not go there. I think if there is a strong ghost presence, it is probably in some of those areas that she had sealed off to everyone but herself, because that is where she came up with the ideas of where to build the other parts of the mansion. I don't know. What I will say is that I'm sure lots of mediums have gone there and seen lots of different things. Me, surprisingly unhaunted. I'm not saying them other mediums are wrong. I don't know. What I am saying is that I didn't experience anything. Okay. So, that being said, I did have another ghost encounter while I was in San Francisco. Well, Winchester Mansion isn't actually in San Francisco. I believe it was San Jose. Either way, a couple days later, I went to San Francisco, and I went to the, I'm not going to pronounce this right at all, Mécanique Museum. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's French for Mechanical Museum. It's a museum there right down San Francisco on the pier. There's they have all them piers. It's right down there, and it's really neat. They have all these different old coin-operated mechanical animatronics and different stuff like that. They have a bunch of different little things you can put in a quarter and look in the viewing glass and turn the wheel and see different things taking place in there. Bunches of those. A bunch of old arcade games. They had Spy Hunter, which is one of my favorite games as a kid. Not very good at it now. It has been like 30 years since I've played that game. So, you know. But either way, it was there. That was fun. But they had lots of these coin-operated fortune tellers. And most of them were just cute. It was fun. I'll share some pictures of those as well. But there was one that as soon as I walked over to it, I felt a presence inside of that machine. And so I put a quarter in, I popped it in, and I stared into the machine, and the machine stared back. This spirit within that fortune-telling device looked into me as I looked into it. And it was a pretty good reading for the small reading that it was. That one I have for me. But because it was so interesting, I immediately got out my phone, put in another quarter, and decided that I would do a reading for my viewers with the arcade machine. And so, that is what this is.
Now yes. Okay, so quite an interesting looking machine there. That was fun. Interpret the reading. I feel that you should interpret the reading how you see fit. I'm not going to interpret it for you. That is for my viewers. Anyways, that's pretty much the last thing that happened on my journey. I then did well, it's not the last thing, obviously, because I didn't go straight home from there. But from there, I only had one day to get from Sacramento, or yeah, that basic area to back to my home. So I was just going to cruise on I-80 all the way home. I did the same spell where I imagined myself getting home safely, envisioned the line, put myself in the shell, snapped my fingers, and then left to go home. And I made it home without incident. When I got here, things had fallen a bit apart in my absence, so then it took me a while to make another video. At any rate, here I am now, and that's this video. That isn't the end of this video. I'd like to talk a little bit more about that liminal space. I wrote a post in the guild about this, and I'm actually just going to go ahead and read it because it came out pretty well. And so if you see me, if I look like I'm looking at something and reading a screen, well, it's because I am. Okay. First I quoted myself from something I had said before because, well, what kind of douchebag goes around quoting himself? I find myself being called to wander once again. The call of the open road caresses my soul, and I must go. Okay, so there is a special power within the open possibilities of travel that allows the wanderer to exist within a state of liminal space as they tread from one destination to the next, or with no destination at all to distract from the crossing of thresholds one finds not only at crossroads, but with every turn of the wheel/will upon the road. Wandering, then, even if it is not treated as a lifestyle, is a form of gnosis in and of itself, an almost necessary pilgrimage to the development of a sorcerer. Just as important as the inner journey to find the true will of the self, we must also explore the world around us to find the will with which to direct our path. And, well, like I said, travel puts us in this almost zen-like state, especially if we are traveling on our own. These journeys, if you want to go on a journey of walkabout, on a journey to understand the self and understand your context within the fuller pattern of the full shared reality, it is best to take these journeys by oneself. Yeah? I mean, if you have the means to take a plane to a bunch of different destinations, I don't know. I feel that you need to be driving or perhaps walking down a road. Being a passenger or having passengers is not quite the same experience. That being said, traveling isn't something that is absolutely necessary in order to cast spellcraft, of course, and this is only part of my paradigm of how I have found my way to it. So I'm not saying if you don't have the means to travel, you're never going to get good at spellcraft. I am saying that you need to find some way to journey outside of your local environment, some way to understand a fuller context of the entire world around you, rather than the small world that surrounds you in your daily life. Okay, so next, I will very soon be next week. Okay, so very soon I will be putting out a video on grandmother, and in that video I will be giving a fuller context and cohesion to a lot of the things that I have been doing over the last little while, as it all is finally getting put together from the communication that I had with grandmother and the AWA during my travels of this journey. But that will be at a later joint. That will be at a later point. In the meantime, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments below. For joining us. Until next time, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.